So here's a video on the rise of the US dollar and the effects it has on North American trucking. So first, let's have a look at our US dollar and see how it compares today versus the four most popular currencies out there. So I just did a quick Google search. I asked Google for the four most popular currencies in the world. Obviously, the US dollar is number one, the euro is number two, and the Japanese yen is at number three. And I will bring up the Canadian dollar and also bring up the Mexican peso. Why? Because I think that this is very important on what's going to happen in North American trucking. So how does it compare? So one US dollar versus a Canadian dollar. One US dollar today is $1.36 Canadian. If I take one US dollar and I compare it to the euro, it is 1.02. So this is one of the first times that the US dollar has surpassed the value of the euro. The third one, let's compare it to the Japanese yen. One US dollar is 144 Japanese yen, and one US dollar is equal to 20 Mexican pesos. So this is the current situation right now. And then let's just compare that to 3 months ago, and then I'll get on with this video. So 3 months ago, one US dollar was $1.28 Canadian. So you can see how much the US dollar has gained value over the last 3 months. One US dollar was 94 cents when compared to the euro. One US dollar 3 months ago was 129 Japanese yen, and one US dollar was 1954 Mexican pesos. So here it is, the list today, and here is the list from 3 months ago. So the currencies that got most affected, the US dollar went up, big difference in the Canadian dollar, big difference in the euro, big difference in the yen, and no change in the Mexican peso. Now there's a reason to that. So as you can see, the US dollar has strengthened a lot in the last 3 months. And now let's talk about the effects of North American trucking. So by the rise of the US dollar, we're going to talk about who will benefit from this, who is going to get affected, and we will see what is the current situation in the market. Pause. 1 second. Are you interested in being a sponsor for one of our next videos? Do you have a product, app, or service that can benefit our North American truck drivers that you'd like to promote on our channel? With over 125,000 truck drivers across 4 platforms, 8.5 million views in the last 12 months, let our channel bring your product to life. Send us an email if you're interested in sponsoring one of our next videos. And now back to that video. So first off, who's going to benefit by the strengthened US dollar? So definitely US importers are going to benefit. Why? Because if the US dollar is worth a lot more, then you can buy a lot more products overseas. It is no secret that a lot of the European countries are currently suffering with their currencies. So one example is the Turkish lira. I think it's lost about 90% of its value over the last 12 months. Don't quote me, not exact, but pretty much there. So what's going to happen? So the US dollar, if you're going to Turkey right now, your US dollars will go much further than they did a year ago. So US importers, anybody buying from overseas will be able to buy a lot more, so your US dollars will go a longer way. Now, when you're importing, obviously this all comes from with containers, and these containers are going to need to go into warehouses, they're going to be distributed, they're going to go into our shippers, our receivers. So a lot of work coming our way for trucking. So how long is it going to take? I have no clue, but I know that with the strength of the US dollar, we should see some movement and a lot better days coming ahead. So definitely both Canada and Mexico are going to benefit from the rise of the US dollar. Why is that? Because now the US is going to look both at Canada and the US to bring in more shipments. So if they're buying lumber, timber, oils, minerals, cement, these are really popular products that the US buys from Canada. Now they'll be able to buy at a discounted price, 10% actually discounted price. Why? Because the US dollar has gotten up in value over the last 3 months. So just so you're understanding how this works, so imagine a company in the US that purchases cement from Canada, $100,000 worth of cement. Now it's going to cost them about $92,000 for that same $100,000 product, just because of the increased value in the US dollar. So if I was purchasing cement, I would probably purchase a lot more right now just because I get a discount on my cement. Now let's talk about who else is going to benefit. So trucking companies in the US are going to benefit from a stronger US dollar. Now, why is that? Because if people are bringing in more products from overseas, then obviously these products, they need to be transported from the ports and into our manufacturing facilities or warehouses in the US. So that's great for trucking companies, and it'll definitely have a spike in a rise. I don't know how long it's going to take, but definitely trucking companies will benefit from a stronger US dollar and importing more from overseas. So back to our original question, how is this going to affect us drivers out there? Drivers, owner operators, lease operators. Well, if there's more work and the US is purchasing more from overseas, then that's great for you company drivers or owner operators out there, because there's going to be a lot more for you to transport. So as you probably know, the last 4 months were brutal in the trucking industry, whether you're doing inter-US or if you're doing cross-border. The pay rates have significantly dropped. Now, if the US dollar continues to spike up, then obviously they'll be purchasing a lot more from overseas, bringing things back to normal to the way they were a few years ago. So who's going to lose out by this stronger US dollar? Well, definitely exporters. Now, why exporters? Because now for a Canadian company to purchase US goods, it's going to be a lot more expensive. Anybody overseas, for them to purchase products from the US, it's going to be a lot more expensive. So just as an example, if I purchase 5 trucks, I pay $200,000 per truck, that's $1 million. Now, before, if I used to convert it at $1.28, it used to cost me $1.280 million. So $1,280,000 is what it used to cost me Canadian for those 5 trucks. Now that the US dollar has gone up, it's going to cost me 1.360. So I just lost about $80,000 on one transaction of 5 trucks. Now imagine if I was purchasing 10 trucks. What if I was purchasing 100 trucks? So definitely Canadian trucking companies are going to get affected. Most of our products come in from the US. The trucks, the trailers, definitely we are going to get hit, and we're going to get hit hard. Now, for those of you that are doing cross-border shipping, as you've probably noticed that the inbound freight rates have significantly dropped. So anything going from the US into Canada has dropped significantly in price on the live market. Pay rates used to be probably around $3 per mile, and now we're probably hauling it for about $210, $220, and we are struggling with inbound freight. Well, why is that? Because the US dollar is getting higher and higher, Canadian companies are thinking twice whether to buy the products from the US, because it's becoming a lot more expensive to buy that same $100,000 commodity. Now, imagine if it was commodities for not just $100,000, $500,000, $800,000, $1 million. You could take that with all of our appliances. You could take the same formula with appliances in your house, or you could take it with any household goods. You could take it with any products, and that's why we see prices in the store are starting to rise, and they're starting to rise fast. So definitely inbound freight from the US into Canada is going to decrease, and it might even get worse before it gets any better. A third industry that's really going to get hit hard is probably the US tourism. Now, why is that? Because if a tourist wants to come into the US, so I myself, for example, I like to go to Florida. And for me to go to Florida is going to cost me a lot more this time around than it did when the Canadian to US conversion was a lot better. So probably around 10 or 15% more is what it's going to cost me. So those hotel fees, they're all in US dollars. Me going out is all in US dollars. Restaurants is all in US dollars. So instead of going twice a year to Florida, I might think maybe to go only once a year this year, because the cost is a lot more expensive now than it was 6 months ago or 3 months ago. Now, as I promised you, the current situation in the market. So I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but I read the articles almost every single day. That's the first thing I do in the morning, is I read the news on what's happening in our industry. And for the last couple of weeks, I am starting to notice more and more bankruptcies or closures in the US. So a company called Lone Star Dedicated is ceasing operations. I think as of yesterday, 90 drivers will be losing their positions. The president of Lone Star Dedicated said that the reason is that he's getting rid of the headache. Profit margins are just not where they used to be. Interest rates are going up. The price of parts has tripled, and the cost of new equipment is outrageous. So he is 100% right. Profit margins are getting slimmer. Cost of equipment is through the roof. Interest rates are just at an all-time high for us right now, and the profit margins are getting thinner and thinner. So that's why he decided to shut down operations. Another company out of Pennsylvania files for bankruptcy, 30 years in business, a company going out of business. Another company called National Freight Carriers filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, 26 power unit. And then also we have a big company, US Express, announces second round of layoffs. So the company has cut roughly 10% of their corporate workforce. So this is all just in the last month. These are news articles that I keep reading, and I'm starting to notice a trend that more and more companies are going out of business and more companies are ceasing operations or cutting down on their costs. So this is what's headed our way. I don't think there's a simple fix to it. I think that it might get worse before it gets better. So make sure that you're doing that extra thing that you can be doing in order to save, in order to hopefully, you know, when the prices were $4, $5, $6 a mile, that you guys have saved your money and you guys have put some money aside. So company drivers, honestly, I really don't think that you're gonna get affected much. If you're on hourly pay or mileage pay, you know, you're not gonna get affected that much. You might end up looking for another job that has better contracts. You might end up changing the location of where you're working. So through these difficult times, make sure you're a part of this channel. We will help guide you. We will help do the best that you can and make sure that you're in the know of what's happening in our industry. I'm Ronen, R-O-N-E-N, and hopefully I'll catch you in my next video.